Hello, I'm Dr. Shante, and welcome to the Hole in Your Heart podcast, where I help you fill the holes in your life by helping you find the hole in your heart. See what I did there? This is season 1 of the Hole in Your Heart podcast. Season 1 was filmed last year, and I was set to launch this podcast March 2024. But then life spectacularly happened. And so I had to put the podcast on the shelf and wait until this year until life was done lifing. What you're about to see is in a totally different studio. It has a totally different vibe, but the content is still important, and that's what I want you to focus on. So there are 6 episodes this season. Each episode is going to start with this exact video, so in the future feel free to skip it. But I can't wait for you guys to get into this content. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the other side. Hello, and welcome to Hole in Your Heart podcast. I am Dr. Shante, and Hole in Your Heart is the podcast that uses a trauma-informed care approach to help you find wholeness and happiness in your life and in your relationships. So what are we talking about today? Today we are talking about the difference between building walls and setting boundaries. I recently posted this video on Instagram, and I mentioned that one of the things that we need to do to take better care of ourselves is to set boundaries. Take a look. Over the break, I had an opportunity to finish this book called Sacred Self-Care by Dr. Shaniqua Walker Barnes. And something that she emphasized in the book that I can really appreciate is self-care is often associated with get your hair done, get your nails done, go get a massage, treat yourself to a nice dinner. And that's cool and you'll be cute. But if you take your car to the car wash and you get it detailed, it looks nice and shiny. But if you don't do the oil change, if you don't get the filters changed out, if you don't do that internal maintenance, then you really have not achieved optimal care for the car. And if you don't do that internal maintenance, then you really have not achieved optimal self-care for yourself. And so when we're talking about doing that inner work, are you making those internal shifts like prioritizing your health? Are you having uncomfortable conversations so that you are advocating for your needs to be seen and heard? Are you being honest about how you feel, or are you faking fine and saying like, oh, it's cool, it's whatever, it's do you, acting like things don't bother you when they really do? Are you setting boundaries versus building walls? Because there is a difference. Self-care is what facilitates your ability to be your best and highest self. And so if you are not doing that internal work and you're just focusing on the outside, then what you're doing is setting yourself up for breakdown and burnout, just like if you don't do the internal maintenance with the car. And one of the follow-up questions that I got from that video is, can you say more about building walls versus setting boundaries? Yes, I can. There's a huge difference between building walls and setting boundaries. And trust me, I know this because I have been guilty in the past of building walls, and some of you have as well. When you are building walls, what you are doing is you have made an emotional, or you've made this mental calculus that you're checking out. You're leaving the party, that you are going to start creating emotional distance or physical distance. You have decided to exit stage left without having a conversation with the person or persons with whom that you are going to exit. It's like this concept of like quiet quitting. People decide that they are done with the relationship before the relationship is actually done because they've already made up in their minds that they're going to go. Setting boundaries is something different. So I have my trusty notes here. We're going to unpack it. We're going to get into it. And for those of you that are like, why does she have a notebook? Because I'm a college professor. This is my jam. I always have my pen. I always have my pad of paper. I know we have iPads and tablets and monitors and all the things, but I'm old school. Is that okay? It's okay. All right. So when we're talking about boundaries actually provides information for how people can engage with you in a healthy way. And sometimes setting boundaries is a really tough hill for people to climb, because if you think about the society that we live in right now, even in dating apps, what's the most common thing that happens in dating apps? Ghosting, right? Like, I'd rather just leave. I'd rather just not have that uncomfortable conversation. I'd rather not just send you a 1-sentence text message or a 1-sentence DM and say, I'm really not feeling it, but I wish you well. Rather than doing that, people are just like, I'd rather just, exit, and I don't have to deal with the engagement. I don't have to deal with the response. I don't have to deal with the emotions. I don't have to deal with the conversation. And it's really if I'm being honest, a very cowardly and low level way of personal engagement. We can do better than that. We're better than that. So setting boundaries it creates that level of anxiety for people. Sometimes it creates anxiety, sometimes it creates guilt because we are reluctant to do it. But what boundaries are really doing is communicating what your needs are, right? So it's communicating that you might need space, that you might need time, that you might need to call before you come over here. It's communicating that you might need to pay a deposit before I do any sort of business with you. It's communicating like, how is the healthy way that we can work together, be in relationship together? How can we be in friendship? But boundaries really just kind of establish and set the parameters for how we move forward in relationship, in business, in friendship or partnership. And that reluctance to set those boundaries, where does that come from? So sometimes it comes out of fear, scarcity, fear of rejection. Sometimes it comes out of guilt. And I had this conversation the other day. So I was a guest speaker on WVON radio. Shout out to Atiba Buchanan and Darlene Hill. Hey, girl. And they asked me, they said, well, Dr. Shante, why do people settle for less in relationships? And part of the reason why people settle for less is one, out of scarcity. Scarcity comes from a place of not enough. I'm not enough. I'm not going to advocate for what I need. I'm not going to speak up for myself, because if I show up as my whole and total self, then this person might run away. And so I'm going to shrink and I'm going to be less so that this person gets what they need, but I don't really ever show up as my full self and get what I need. And a lot of that is rooted in anxiety. Also, in terms of that scarcity mindset, there's this notion that there's a lot, and I do mean a lot, of rhetoric in social media, on this platform and others, that say like the dating pool is trash. And you hear these horror stories about these terrible dating experiences. And I'm not here to invalidate that, because those experiences are real and legitimate. But also too, there's a difference between dating from a place of the dating pool is trash, or there's not enough good ones left and no one's available. Like, coming from that deficit, coming from that scarcity, that facilitates a very different dating dynamic than if you come from a place of, I am enough and the market might be tight, but it's not tight for me. And the person that I'm supposed to be with is there. I am opting into a version of myself of abundance and fulfillment and healthy love. And whether I find this person tomorrow or this person finds me next week, I am here and available, and I'm not going to engage or date this person or start a conversation from, well, I better get what I can get because, it's just so hard to find somebody good these days. It's a very different dynamic. It's a very different mindset. Another reason we don't set the boundaries is because there's real guilt attached to that. So many of us have been conditioned to believe that it is our job to make other people happy. It is not your job to make other people happy. Full stop. Happiness is an inside job. Each person, each individual is responsible for his or her own happiness. It's not your job. It's not up to you to, quote unquote, make people happy and become the source of their joy and fulfillment. And many of us are willing to sacrifice our own happiness, okay, our own joy, so that other people can get what they need. And a lot of us have been conditioned to do that. We've been conditioned in families. We've been conditioned in some religious institutions. We've been conditioned in certain schools, environments that, you should always think of others or put the needs of others before yourself. And in some cases, that can be really detrimental to your own survival. That can be detrimental to your own health and happiness. And so you need to evaluate those things on a case-by-case basis. But I will tell you this, one of the biggest reasons why people are reluctant to set boundaries is because they are afraid of what it's going to cost them. Some people have lost people when they set boundaries because we have a primal need for belonging and acceptance. And if we feel like if I set this boundary, this person won't love me anymore. If I set this boundary, this person won't talk to me anymore. If I set this boundary, this person won't come around anymore. And so because we have this primal human need for acceptance and belonging, we will suffer. We will suffer and we will diminish ourselves to try to facilitate the needs of someone else at the expense and cost of our own. And so I will tell you this. if you're going to set boundaries, you need to be prepared. You need to be prepared for people to be uncomfortable. And it's not your job to make them comfortable. It's not your job to manage their discomfort. Here's the thing. Every person is responsible for managing his or her own emotional responses, reactions, baggage, okay? It's not your job to manage it for them, okay? So I want you to imagine like a mom who's sitting at a dinner table and she's cutting her child's meat into small pieces, or she's cutting the crust off the peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And sometimes we do that with other people's emotions, like, oh, okay, I'm going to make this smaller and palatable for you. Okay, I'm going to cut this off, so it can kind of like go down a little bit easier, because setting boundaries doesn't mean being mean. Setting boundaries doesn't mean being cruel. It's saying, hey, moving forward, here is what I would like to happen. Or, hey, moving forward, when things get to a certain level, I'm going to take a step back because that just creates all kinds of funky emotions for me. And so rather than allow it to get to that point, I'm going to take a step back and I will circle back to this next week, And so it doesn't have to be delivered in a way that is mean or off-putting, but sometimes people are so used to getting what they want from you. People are so used to getting what they need from you. People are so used to just trespassing and trampling all over your lawn that the notion that you would even put up any sort of guardrails can be off-putting to them, and that's not something that you have to manage. That's something that they have to manage. That is why it is called self-care, because we are self-managing. So building walls, when you just say, you know what, I'm done with this, and then you ghost, or you go quiet, or you disappear, that really doesn't get to the root of the issue, and it really doesn't let the other person know what you need to engage in a healthier way. So I hope that answers that question, the difference between building walls, setting boundaries, some of the reasons why we don't. And if you are enjoying this content, well, you just go ahead and subscribe. Hit that subscribe button and feel free to share this, because that's always the biggest joy to me. I love when people share content, and I know long form content can be like a little bit dicey to share because it's like, who has time for that? But you never know. People can listen to this video as well as watch it. My goal is just to help as many people as possible find the wholeness in their heart to live a whole and happier lives. So I'm Dr. Shante. Feel free to drop some comments down there if this resonated with you, and I will see you on the next episode of Whole in Your Heart. Thank you for watching this episode of the podcast. I would love to hear your feedback, so feel free to hop into the comments, give me your 2 cents. I read and respond to every single post. I can't wait to engage with you. If you like this podcast, make sure you like, subscribe, and always feel free to share.